About Egypt. We thought we'd talk about Libya.
It's so close to Egypt.
Well, absolutely, and it's right next door to Tunisia. So there's another reason why this is a very timely and important event. Although we did plan it before the overthrow or the flight of Ben Ali and the protests in Tahrir. And although it's not the topic of today's event, we will be talking about how the growing demand for reform and change around the Middle East will be touching upon how Libya manages its issues. The focus, though, of today's talk was motivated by a trip that David and Charles Dittrich took in December as part of a delegation with the US-Libya Business Association. And there in Tripoli, they met with government leaders, private business leaders, and representatives of American companies based in Tripoli. And we wanted to hear more about their impressions of their trip and pick their brains about the view of the US-Libya relationship from the perspective of Tripoli, which is always very interesting. Now, the second motivator of the talk was the Wikileaks controversy. The leaks have rocked many of our relations with countries around the world, and Libya was no exception. The U.S.'s very able ambassador to Tripoli, Jean Kretz, was quoted in the secret cables as talking about Muammar Gaddafi's reliance on a very voluptuous blonde Ukrainian nurse. That did not go down well in Tripoli, and Ambassador Kretz has been recalled and may be leaving his post. Has that been confirmed yet, David? I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, making him one of the casualties of the WikiLeaks controversy. So we'll also be talking about that today. Now, we could not have with us two more experienced Libya hands to talk about the state of U.S.-Libyan relations in the wake of all this, as well as the impact of Arab protests on the government of Muammar Gaddafi. We'll be starting with our very own David Mack, a scholar here at MEI, who has been doing an amazing job these past few weeks addressing media questions about the Arab world. David has served in the Arab world for over 25 years? More than that? Okay. All right, over 30 years. And his postings have included Iraq, Jordan, Jerusalem, Lebanon, Libya, and Tunisia. He served as U.S. ambassador to the United Arab Emirates and later as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs. He's been a consultant for numerous private companies doing business in Libya and elsewhere. And he also has an article that I want to bring to your attention that is on our website. It's called The U.S. and Libya, Normalization of a Stormy Relationship, and it can be found under our Policy Insights on our website. It's a very, very important read. Charles Dittrich is the Executive Director of the US-Libya Business Association and also Vice President for Regional Trade Initiatives at the National Foreign Trade Council. He has directed the NFTC's U.S. Middle East Free Trade Coalition since its inception and has led the Council's advocacy and outreach efforts to press for passage and implementation of free trade agreements with Bahrain, Morocco, and Oman. He has spent over 20 years at the nexus of business and government policy, working with domestic and foreign corporations and governments on trade issues concerning Europe, South Asia, and the Middle East. I suggest you go to the website of the US-Libya Business Association to check out more of what they do. So I want to thank both gentlemen for joining us today. It's rare that we have so much Libya expertise in one room, so we want to take full advantage of it, and we'll begin with Ambassador Mack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you have no idea how much Libya expertise you have here in the room. I look out in the audience, and I see two of my former Foreign Service colleagues, Jim Plack and Joe Montville, who were with me in Libya in September 1969, when Muammar Gaddafi and a few other officers in their late 20s took charge of that country. And being in my late 20s at that time, as Joe was, Jim he was a little over 30, so we really didn't trust him. But we could really feel a certain amount of empathy with these young men. And it's been interesting to see how we have aged over time and how they have aged over time as well. I also got a number of Libyan friends that I have met in recent years, and I'm very glad to see you here in the audience with us, both from the Libyan American private sector and from the Libyan embassy. Now, Chuck and I went to Libya in December, mid-December, for a couple of reasons, but one of them is that officials in both governments had urged us to attend at that particular time. And it was noteworthy that that visit occurred while the official relationship was once again being very severely tested, and this time because of the Wikileaks dissemination of diplomatic cables that had proved very embarrassing to U.S. Ambassador Kretz and to Muammar al-Gaddafi. And despite the tension that that caused, the scheduled government-to-government discussions of trade and investment also took place at this time. Chuck is going to be discussing these consultations, as well as the overall commercial environment and our meetings with Libyan economic officials and business persons from both countries, which was the primary reason for the two of us being out there. But to some extent, the working level official talks and our visit illustrated in a very concrete way the desire of both governments to improve and expand bilateral relations. And that's very consistent with the history of US-Libyan relations since the late 90s. And thank you for making a plug for my article on the MEI website, because it's basically US-Libyan relations from George Washington to Gene Kretz. And it provides a bit of perspective. Certainly, after decades of near total estrangement, we have seen a slow improvement of relations between the two governments, 2 steps forward, 1 step back at times, but over more than 13 years, that's certainly since 1998 when the secret talks began between the two governments, the general direction has been one of cautious probing for areas of mutual agreement and for overlapping interests between former adversaries. And Libyan suspicions of U.S. intentions remain high. That certainly, I think, we found that true when we were out there. But it's also clear that both sides see a strategic advantage to normalizing our relations and to broadening them. While domestic attitudes in both countries dictate that the pace of normalization is going to be slow and jerky, both governments seem to desire a broader relationship. Now, the basis of that is strategic for both of them. And changing from being adversaries to being very cautious and wary in cooperation, allies not the word, but partners of cooperation of various kinds, has paid huge strategic benefits for both. For the United States, it means that what was a former adversary and a source of great instability in the Western Mediterranean has actually collaborated with us in a number of ways, including things that are as unexpected as aid to the people of Darfur when you couldn't get in any other way than through the port of Benghazi. For Libya, of course, it's paid off notably in terms of the fact that we had a Libyan General Assembly president for a year recently. Libya had a chair on the Security Council for 2 years, our seat on the Security Council. These are the sort of things that would have been unimaginable without the rapprochement between the two sides. So strategically, it's been quite valuable to both. But also for Libya, educational exchange, and particularly graduate education in the United States, which had been a very important foundation to Libya's economic and social development at an earlier time when our relations were still good. But that can be an important part of developing the country's potential today. The Libyan generations that came of age in the 1980s and 1990s were mostly excluded from the U.S. university training and the on-the-job training in U.S. companies in Libya that was so prized by their fathers and uncles.